Spring Boot and multiple external configuration files introduction. In real-world Spring Boot applications, configuration often needs to come from multiple external files instead of a single application.yml. Examples: different configs for environments, separate files for database, security, APIs, secrets stored outside the codebase, config shared across microservices. Spring Boot supports loading multiple external configuration files to keep applications flexible and maintainable. This is very important for production deployments, cloud environments, Docker, Kubernetes setups, large enterprise applications. What does multiple external configuration files mean? It means your application reads configuration from more than one file located outside the jar. In simple terms, external files means combined, means final application configuration. Example concept: config1.yml plus config2.yml means merged configuration. Why this is important? Without multiple config files, one big file, hard to manage, difficult to scale. With multiple files, separated configs means cleaner structure, means easier maintenance. Example concept: split config means organized application settings, default external configuration locations. Spring Boot automatically looks for external config files in config, current directory class path, config, class path, dot. Example concept: external file means overrides internal config. Method 1, using spring.config.location. You can specify multiple config files explicitly. Example, java-jar app.jar #spring.config.location equals class path application.yml config.db.yml file config api.yml. Example concept: multiple locations means loaded in order. Method 2, using spring.config additional location. This adds external files without replacing default ones. Example, java-jar app.jar spring config additional location file config file extra config. Example concept: default config plus additional config means merged. Method 3, using folder-based configuration. Place multiple files inside a folder. Config, application.yml, db.yml, api.yml. Then load spring.config.additional location file config. Spring Boot will automatically load all supported config files. Method 4, using profiles with multiple files. Combine profiles with multiple config files. Example, application dev.yml, application prod.yml, dbdev.yml, dbprod.yml. Example concept: active profile means matching config files loaded. Method 5, importing additional files. Spring Boot 2.4+. Spring Boot supports spring.config.import. Example, spring config import optional file config db.yml, optional file config api.yml. Example concept: main config means imports additional configs. This is one of the cleanest modern approaches. Configuration priority order. Spring Boot resolves properties in order. Command line arguments, external config files, internal application.yml. Example concept: higher priority means overrides lower priority. Property override. Example, db YAML spring, data source URL, JDBC, Microsoft.com, localhost 3306, db1, application.yml, spring data source URL, JDBC, Microsoft.com/localhost 3306, db2. Result: external file overrides internal means db1 used. Real-world example folder structure: config, application.yml, database.yml, security.yml, api.yml, run command, java-jar app.jar, plus spring.config.additional location file colon. Example concept: multiple config files means modular configuration system, using environment variables with multiple files. You can still use environment variables inside external files. DB password. $DB password. Example concept. External file plus n variable means dynamic configuration. Common mistakes. 1. Using spring.config.location incorrectly. It replaces default config instead of adding. 2. Wrong file path. File config db.yml. File.config db.yml. 3. Missing file extension. Spring supports .yml, .yaml, .properties. 4. Order confusion. Later files override earlier ones. 5. Forgetting optional prefix. Without it, missing files cause startup failure. Best practices. Best practices include: use spring.config.additional location instead of replacing defaults. Organize configs by purpose. DB, API, security. Use spring.config.import for modular configs. Keep sensitive data outside codebase. Use environment variables for secrets. Document configuration structure. Example concept. Modular config means scalable architecture advantages. Advantages include: better organization, flexible configuration management, easy environment switching, improved security, scalable for large applications. Challenges. Challenges include: understanding config priority debugging overrides, managing multiple files, path configuration errors, concepts learned. By learning this topic, you understand how Spring Boot loads external config, how to use multiple config files, difference between location and additional location, how to use spring.config.import, how property overriding works, how to structure large configurations. Simple definition. Multiple external configuration files in Spring Boot. The ability to load and combine configuration from several external files to build a flexible and scalable application setup. Final summary. Spring Boot supports loading multiple external configuration files, allowing you to split configuration into smaller, manageable pieces. You can use spring.config additional location, recommended. Spring.config location, spring.config import, modern approach. These files are merged and properties are resolved based on priority. This approach helps you build scalable applications, secure configurations, environment-specific setups,